And the last major sex segment of the month. Loki, Daniels, and Skipper defeated Amazing Red in the SATs in the main event of the third show of the month, the December 18th pay-per-view, in honestly probably one of the best matches in TNA history up to this point.
Absolute fucking banger.
It's just such a great match where it's like Loki, Daniels, and Skipper are back. 3 exceptional wrestlers. Red and the SATs are like the perfect underdogs, and they just do this great match. It has one of the best heat segments I've ever seen in wrestling where they're working over Red.
I was going to say, like, you obviously have all of the X Division high-flying shenanigans that you'd hope, and you'd have the crispness of your Daniels and Key in there as well. But the thing that's most notable is just a tremendous heat segment on Red, where you are living and dying by it. And it helps that, you know, you got Don West climbing on top of the announce table and screaming in support of Red the entire time, because you believe that it's legitimate, and you believe that this dude is, like, living and dying by Red right now, because Red is his favorite wrestler in the whole fucking world. So you have that aspect playing into it too, but, like, just tremendously worked match this.
Yeah, that Don West moment where he loses himself in the match as Red is like making his comeback and he's just chanting, "Go Red, go." He gets up on the announce table and he just emotionally loses himself in the match. Is such a wonderful moment that you don't see on commentary. You know, normally they do try to be like, commentators are supposed to be the unbiased observers here who are supposed to call the match down the middle, as opposed to Don West who's just like, this guy rules, I love him, this match rules, it's the best thing I've ever seen in my life, I'm just going to go bonkers for it. And he spent like the last 10 minutes of the match standing on the announce table.
Well, you know what I think it is? I think bias on a face commentator can be endearing, while bias on a heel commentator is annoying.
And the interesting thing is, like, they do bias in the heel commentator way more than they do bias in the face commentator.
Because it's cheap. It's easy to do. Because to do it with a face commentator or announcer, you need to have goodwill with the audience. They need to be liked already. They need to be charming so that the crowd doesn't turn on them for being obviously biased. There's a whole lot more factors in doing it, and it only works for certain people. It works for Don West, it works for Mike Tenay, it works for Tony Schiavone. Like, you need to be exceptional talents in that kind of way for it to play off. Otherwise it comes off as like disingenuous, or even makes the face announcers look bad because they're taking sides. The problem, like, and the reason it's so abused with heel guys, is just you can just have any dickhead out there say, "Oh, I don't like this guy." Like, and then there's nothing at risk there. There's nothing at play there. It's all surface level bullshit. With a face, you have to kind of dig in and add some layers beyond that, and you have to work for it a little bit, which I think is why it also comes across much better when it does work.
Yeah, if the entire sex angle was just matches like this. Matches like Loki, Daniels, and Skipper against Red and the SATs, like giving a framework and emotional investment into matches featuring very good wrestlers, thumbs up. Sadly, wasn't always matches like this, as illustrated by the person who debuted after this match, the big new member of Sports Entertainment Extreme, David Flair.
I mean, just hilarious, right?
Yeah, David Flair comes out because Hennig comes out at the end of the show to try and beat up Sex again, but then David Flair, son of Rick, makes his TNA debut, gets Hennig in the figure 4, sits there for like 2 minutes. It actually it popped me because there's a ton of people like around him brawling and fighting and all that, and he's just still sitting there in his figure 4 for 2 minutes.
And then Jarrett beats him up and puts him in it, which is great. I don't know, I'm not going to shit on David Flair being brought in for this. I think it's funny.
It is, but like the problem is it becomes a lot more about wrestlers like David Flair than it becomes about wrestlers like Loki. And if it stayed being about wrestlers like Loki, it probably would have been a much better angle than David Flair and some of the people who will follow David Flair in the months to come. As we move over to the X Division, it was a big Amazing Red month. He beat AJ Styles in a singles match, a really good singles match. I prefer the other one, but this is still a really good singles match.
I like the other one way more.
Yeah, the other one was because this one was more AJ just beating down on Red for the vast majority of the match, and then Red made like a 2-minute comeback at the end and won, which I still think worked pretty well for what they were going for in terms of like Red winning a match against AJ and kind of being elevated somewhat. But yeah, the first match is better, though the finish of this match is better because they go up top and Red hits a super Frankensteiner where AJ does like a full 450 splash rotation and lands on his face, and it's incredible.
It's a great sell from it.
AJ, very good wrestler. Who'd have thunk that this AJ Styles kid has got it?
Speaking of AJ Styles.
The interesting though, that's basically AJ's last match in the X Division.
Ever. He never goes back.
No, never, ever, ever. Because the week before he did a double elimination match with Easy Money against AJ against Joel Maximo against Kid Cash, which is I didn't even think it was a particularly good match, but it's mostly interesting for the fact that they tried to elevate Joel Maximo of all people, who had like the miracle run in that match.
Yeah.
Because the story was that Styles beat up Red before the match to take him out, because Red actually had a bone spurs in his ankle, I think it was, something like that. Oof. So he couldn't compete.
This is a big SAT month, and I'm including Red in that as well.
Yeah, it's a big SAT period, because as we mentioned, like they've been all over these shows for like 2 or 3 months now, which is quite nice to see, and quite sad that this is basically the end of it.
Well, see, that's what I was saying in the watch-along. I was like, you know, forgive me for saying at this point, the SAT feel like staples of the NWA-TNA. So, not, you know, with my 2021 knowledge base, to know that they don't become staples of the company was it's surprising to me, but I guess we'll see how that unfolds. And I guess this kind of goes to a broader overall point that I was going to save for later on, but might as well do it now because it kind of works. You'd think that the X Division stuff would be like Russo's wet dream wrestling-wise, because it's dynamic, it's fast, it doesn't lend itself to traditional expectations. It's out there, but it really just seems like Russo just hates everything in the ring. Like, you think that, like, hey, you know, these guys are going out there doing their flips and going 100 miles an hour, bucking tradition in the face would be his whole jam when it comes to wrestling, but it seems like not even that tickles his fancy.
No, he just doesn't like wrestling. I think that's just what it comes down to. He just doesn't like wrestling. Because I think he's one of the kind of guys who's like, oh, look at these small personality-less geeks. Because that's the issue. Like, these are good wrestlers. They're not Vince Russo's idea of what a wrestling personality should look like. And that's the reason he hates them all.
That sucks.
Yeah, so Red has a good month, especially with that main event on the last show of the month, as you mentioned, where he has like probably the defining performance of his TNA career so far.